The siren test happens on a Thursday morning. It's routine, monthly. The sound rolls across Berlin's rooftops, sharp and mechanical, then fades into the hum of traffic. Most people ignore it, but deep beneath the city, in a bunker sealed since 1989, engineers are cutting through rust-covered blast doors. The air inside smells like concrete, dust, and forgotten decades. They're not exploring history. They're preparing for what comes next. Germany is rebuilding its civil defense network. Not metaphorically, not as a symbolic gesture. Actually rebuilding it. Billions of euros, hundreds of facilities. A timeline that ends in 2029. The government calls it Vorsorge precaution. Others call it something darker. Acknowledgement. Acknowledgement that the world has shifted. That proximity to conflict is no longer measured in miles, but in minutes. That the infrastructure of safety, the invisible scaffolding that holds modern life together, is more fragile than anyone wants to admit. This isn't a drill, it's a blueprint. And if Europe's most stable democracy believes it needs bunkers again, what does that say about the world we're entering? More urgently, what does it say about America, a nation that dismantled its civil defense decades ago and never looked back? Germany's strategy doesn't look like Cold War paranoia. It looks like engineering. The bunkers being restored aren't meant to house families for months. They're designed for the critical window, the first 48 to 72 hours after an event. The hours when shock waves settle, when radiation disperses enough for movement, when emergency responders regain situational awareness and can begin coordinated rescue operations. Those hours are everything. Inside the upgraded shelters, survivability is built into every surface. Reinforced concrete layers thick enough to absorb blast pressure and debris impact. Filtration systems that draw outside air through multi-stage scrubbers, removing particulates, chemical agents, and radioactive dust before it reaches human lungs. Interior corridors designed with isolation zones, so if one section is compromised, the rest remains functional. It's naval architecture applied to land. Watertight thinking in a world where the threats don't come from the sea. Sustainability follows. Independent power units hum in backup mode, ready to activate the moment the grid fails. Water reserves sit in steel tanks, enough for 2 days of rationed use. Medical stations are compact but equipped tourniquets, burn kits, radiation sickness protocols. Rations engineered for long shelf life line the walls in unmarked crates. The shelters aren't comfortable. They're not supposed to be. They're supposed to keep people alive long enough for the outside world to stabilize. But the third pillar is what separates modern bunkers from their Cold War predecessors: communication. Germany's shelters are now equipped with satellite receivers, encrypted radios, and digital signage linked directly to federal crisis response channels, even if cell towers collapse. Even if cyber attacks gut commercial networks, clear instructions can still be broadcast. Panic is a virus. Clarity is the vaccine. These bunkers don't stand alone. They connect to a wider ecosystem. Early warning sirens tested every month. Broadcast networks with protected redundancy. Emergency protocols distributed to every state government. Municipalities rehearse communication drills. Hospitals revise mass casualty procedures. Families are encouraged to maintain 10 days of essential supplies: water, food, first aid, battery-powered radios. It's a layered security shield. Smart households, trained institutions, hardened infrastructure. The message is unmistakable. The cost of being unprepared is now higher than the cost of preparation. And while Germany rebuilds, America watches from across the ocean, a nation with the world's most advanced military and almost no civil defense infrastructure for ordinary citizens. In the United States, the phrase civil defense belongs to black and white footage. Families crouching under school desks, fallout shelter signs on public buildings, siren tests that once echoed through every city. That system is gone, dismantled, forgotten. Today, America possesses carrier strike groups, stealth bombers, and satellite networks that can track a car from orbit. But it has no nationwide public bunkers, no standardized federal shelter guidelines, no unified alert system linking sirens, radios, and mobile devices in a seamless national network. Responsibility is divided. FEMA handles disaster relief, hurricanes, floods, wildfires. Local emergency managers focus on regional threats. States operate independently. Counties draft their own plans. Individuals are told to prepare, but there's no national framework, no shared infrastructure, no system that treats civil defense as a collective obligation rather than a personal choice. The result is a patchwork. In some cities, emergency managers are well-trained and well-funded. In others, the plan is a 3-page PDF document that hasn't been updated since 2008. There are no designated shelter spaces capable of absorbing citizens during immediate shock events. No basements reinforced for blast pressure. No filtration systems for contaminated air. In most cities, the closest equivalent to a bunker is a parking garage. And parking garages don't protect against radiation. This gap becomes more concerning when you consider America's modern vulnerabilities. A single missile strike on critical infrastructure, a large-scale cyber attack targeting power grids, a long-duration blackout. Any of these scenarios would affect millions simultaneously. Emergency responders would be overwhelmed within hours. Hospitals, already stretched thin, would struggle with surges. Power grids, aging and fragile, could take days or longer to stabilize. And yet, unlike Germany, America has no system in place to absorb the immediate shock. Part of the challenge is perception. The United States is geographically distant from most adversaries. Many Americans believe oceans guarantee safety. It's a comforting myth, but history disproves it. Pearl Harbor proved it. September 11th proved it. And modern missile systems, hypersonic glide vehicles, cyber weapons, they don't care about geography. Distance isn't immunity. It's an illusion. Another barrier is political. Civil defense requires coordination across federal, state, and municipal authorities. It demands investment in infrastructure that may never be visibly used. It requires acknowledging uncomfortable truths about national vulnerability. For decades, these conversations have been deferred, soft, or avoided. Meanwhile, Germany and several European nations are moving in the opposite direction, toward readiness, toward drills, toward built resilience. If the United States chose to strengthen national preparedness, it wouldn't need to mirror Europe's system exactly. America's size, geography, and federal structure demand a uniquely American model, one capable of supporting both cities and rural regions, integrating local governance with federal coordination, leveraging private innovation alongside public infrastructure. A realistic civil defense blueprint would begin with 3 foundational pillars: information, protection, and medical readiness. First, information. A unified national alert network. America already has the emergency alert system and wireless phone alerts, but these tools operate inconsistently across states. They don't integrate physical sirens, satellite communication, and community-level broadcast channels. A modern system would unify all alerts under a single federal protocol with redundant delivery pathways. Whether a citizen is underground, off-grid, or without cell service, they would receive the same clear message at the same moment. This network would connect emergency radios, smart home devices, television broadcasts, and digital signage in public spaces into a single, unified warning and guidance system. With one command, the federal government could deliver coordinated, real-time instructions to tens of millions of people at once. Not just alerts, but clear direction. Where to go, when to shelter, how long to stay put, and what actions matter most in the first critical minutes. Reducing confusion, preventing mass panic, improving early protective action. In a crisis, information is as valuable as shelter because it shapes every decision that follows. And right now, America's information infrastructure is fragmented, split across apps, agencies, local systems, and outdated technologies that may not survive the very events they're meant to warn about. A modern network would be built for redundancy and simplicity. If cell towers fail, radios still speak. If power drops, battery-backed signage still glows. If the internet fractures, broadcast systems still carry a single, trusted message. The goal isn't sophistication for its own sake, but reliability under stress. One voice, one system. One source people know to trust when everything else feels uncertain. Second, protection. Public shelters and hardened infrastructure. Rebuilding a U.S. shelter network wouldn't require Cold War-style bunkers beneath every building or massive underground cities. Instead, the government could identify and upgrade structures that already exist. Subway stations, underground parking facilities, reinforced basements in schools and government buildings, storm shelters in tornado-prone regions. With filtration upgrades, radiation shielding, emergency lighting, water access, and standardized signage, these places could be transformed into practical, community-level protection hubs. Modern engineering also offers modular solutions, deployable shelters that can be installed quickly in regions without large underground facilities. Prefabricated, scalable, and designed to integrate with local terrain and infrastructure. State by state, a network of Tier 1 safe sites could form locations known to every household, listed on maps, built into navigation systems, and taught in schools. Supported by local emergency services, marked clearly, tested regularly. Not hidden relics, but visible parts of civic life. It's not about building a fortress beneath every town. It's about creating enough protected space to absorb the immediate shock, stabilize the population, and give people a fighting chance when the first hours matter most. Third, medical readiness. Hospital surge protocols. Germany's reforms highlight an uncomfortable truth. Even the most advanced health systems can collapse under mass casualty conditions. Beds vanish, power strains, staff exhausts. Supplies disappear. For the United States, federal funding could require hospitals to maintain realistic surge plans, protected backup power systems, hardened supply storage, and independent communication lines that don't rely solely on public networks. Mobile field units could be pre-positioned. Agreements between regions could allow rapid sharing of staff and resources when one area is overwhelmed. Just as important would be training. Regional drills, much like fire or earthquake exercises, would test readiness and expose gaps before real crises occur. Not paper plans, but live simulations that reveal where systems fail, where coordination breaks, and where precious minutes are lost. Each drill becomes a lesson. Each lesson becomes resilience. Together, these pillars, information, protection, and medical readiness, form a system oriented around speed, clarity, and resilience. Not fear. They acknowledge that preparedness isn't about predicting disaster, naming enemies, or chasing worst-case scenarios. It's about ensuring society remains functional when the unexpected happens, when lights go out, when networks fail, when the familiar rhythms of daily life stop. And they recognize a deeper truth. National resilience works best when the responsibilities of state and citizen align, when the government builds the systems and the public knows how to use them, when households prepare and institutions stand ready, when trust flows both ways. In that partnership, preparedness becomes more than policy. It becomes a shared commitment to endure together. But what happens if America chooses not to prepare? Germany's bunker revival isn't simply a construction project. It's a reflection of national philosophy, a quiet declaration that civilian life must remain protected even in moments of existential threat. It says that safety is not an afterthought reserved for recovery, but a foundation built in advance. Europe's leaders increasingly frame preparedness not as pessimism, but as stewardship, an obligation to future generations, an investment in stability that transcends political cycles, election seasons, and shifting headlines. For the United States, the cost of inaction would be subtler, but no less profound. It wouldn't arrive all at once in a single dramatic collapse. It would unfold in confusion, in the opening hours of a major crisis, whether triggered by conflict, cyber attack, or electromagnetic pulse. American families would be largely on their own, scanning phones that may no longer work, turning to televisions that show only static. Without designated shelters, millions would seek improvised protection in basements, parking garages, or office buildings never meant to withstand radiation, firestorms, or prolonged isolation. Without coordinated alerts, misinformation would spread faster than facts. Social media would fill the void left by silent authorities, amplifying rumors, false maps, and imagined threats. One viral post could move crowds faster than any official instruction. Without hospital surge systems, medical facilities could be overwhelmed, not only by injuries, but by fear-driven visits, people desperate for reassurance, medication, or simply a place that still has power and light. Doctors and nurses would be forced into impossible choices as supplies thin and backup systems fail. And without household guidance, basic survival skills, water storage, emergency lighting, communication planning, most people would be operating blind. How much water is enough? How long should you stay inside? When is it safe to move? In the absence of answers, every decision becomes a gamble. Survival turns into guesswork, and guesswork into tragedy. These weaknesses don't only affect crisis response. They shape public psychology long before anything happens. A society without preparedness infrastructure becomes a society that panics easily, because it has never been shown a path through uncertainty. It mistrusts institutions because those institutions have never demonstrated visible readiness. It fractures under pressure because there is no shared script to follow when normal life breaks down. Fear becomes personal, and so does survival. Conversely, nations with strong civil defense, Finland, Switzerland, and now Germany, tend to exhibit higher social cohesion during emergencies. People know what to do. They know where to go. They trust that the system, however strained, will hold long enough to matter. That trust doesn't eliminate fear, but it contains it. It turns millions of individual reactions into something closer to a collective response. The American public often views preparedness as an individual responsibility. Stockpiles, radios, supplies, these are framed as personal choices, sometimes even as eccentric habits, rather than as components of a collective safety net. The message is implicit. You're on your own. Do what you can. Hope it's enough. But personal readiness, no matter how well-intentioned, cannot replace national systems. A generator can't substitute for a functioning grid. A pantry can't replace secure supply chains. A first aid kit can't stand in for a hospital that still has power. Germany's strategy shows that national resilience works best when individual and state responsibilities align. When the household has its kit and the government has its shelters. When the citizen knows the drill and the institution has the infrastructure. When preparation is not a niche concern but a shared civic culture. It's a partnership between people and policy, between everyday habits and long-term planning. And right now, America has only half of it. If the United States does not adapt, it risks entering the next era of global instability without the tools that other advanced nations now consider essential. Preparedness would remain uneven, strong in some households, non-existent in others. In one neighborhood, families might have generators, water, radios, and plans. In the next, people would rely on hope and a charged phone. When disruption comes, that gap becomes the fault line where systems fracture and trust erodes. Communities would experience crises, not as coordinated responses, but as cascading failures. The grocery store empties in hours as shelves strip bare and supply trucks stall on closed highways. The hospital turns people away, not from lack of compassion, but from lack of beds, power, staff, and medicine. The power stays off for days, then weeks, and each hour without light chips away at modern life. No refrigeration, no fuel pumps, no internet, no sense of normalcy. In the absence of clear guidance, fear fills the vacuum. Rumors spread faster than facts. Anxiety becomes the loudest voice in the room. Yet the path forward isn't bleak. America has unmatched engineering capability, technological innovation, Local emergency expertise forged through hurricanes, fires, floods, and storms. The blueprint exists in fragments across agencies, states, universities, and private industry. The resources exist in budgets already spent on recovery instead of resilience. What remains is the decision to acknowledge vulnerability, to admit that strength is not the absence of risk, but the presence of preparation, to learn from nations that have acted before crisis forced their hand, to build a system robust enough to protect 330 million people, not just in theory, but in practice. Germany has chosen its direction. Europe, in many ways, has followed. Public warning systems are modernized, shelters mapped and marked, citizens educated not with fear, but with clarity. Preparedness is treated as infrastructure, as vital as roads and bridges. Whether the United States will do the same depends not on fear, but on foresight. Preparedness isn't about predicting catastrophe. It's about refusing to be unprepared when history turns. It's about understanding that the world has changed, that threats move faster than policy, and that the infrastructure of safety, the invisible scaffolding that holds modern life together, requires constant maintenance, investment, and public trust. The siren test happens on a Thursday morning. It's routine, monthly. The sound rolls across Berlin's rooftops, sharp and mechanical, then fades into the hum of traffic. But this time people pause. They listen. They remember the drills from school and work. They know where the nearest shelter is, even if they hope never to use it. They've read the pamphlets mailed to their homes. They've stocked water, batteries, and food. They're ready, not because they expect the worst, but because they've decided that readiness is a responsibility, not a luxury. That culture didn't appear overnight. It was built through policy, education, and repetition, through leaders who spoke plainly about risk, through systems designed to work on ordinary days so they wouldn't fail on extraordinary ones. Over time, preparedness became normal, almost invisible, woven into daily life like seatbelts or smoke alarms. And in America, the sirens are silent. The shelters are gone. The system is a patchwork of aging infrastructure, local heroism, and federal plans few citizens have ever seen. Some towns are models of readiness. Others have little more than faith and luck. The question isn't whether a crisis will come. The question is whether, when it does, the nation will be ready to protect its people, or whether it will watch unprepared as the old world ends and a new, harder one begins.